Jesus, draw me ever nearer as I labor through the storm.
Good morning. Welcome to Championship Sunday. I would like to say, for those of you who may have caught a t-shirt, those were customized for this Championship Sunday. If you take a look at it, it says Team FCC from Shane Howard and KG, so I appreciate so much their generosity toward that. As you saw in the video, what some people think is a risk may not be a risk to everyone else. It may be a risk to hire a 4-year-old to do a grown-up job, but for some it may not be. One thing is clear, risk means different things to different people. In certain situations, it might be worth taking the risk by stepping out and taking that job that you may be unsure of, but you believe that it's where God's taking you, or taking that risk and buying that house, even though it's going to be a higher payment than what you have gotten accustomed to. All these things are risk, and for some of us, it may not be a big risk, but for others, it's a risk nonetheless. When God asks us to take a risk, it is so that we can use our gifts and resources to do something and be a part of something great. Nehemiah had to take a risk. In Nehemiah 2:1-3, it says this: during the month of Nisan in the 12th year of King Artaxerxes, when the wine was set before him, I took the wine and gave it to the king, and had I never been sad in his presence. So the king said to me, sad in his presence, the king said to me, why are you sad? When you aren't sick, are you not sick? This is nothing but depression. But I was overwhelmed with fear, and replied to him, may the king live forever. Why should I not be sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and the gates have been destroyed by fire? Nehemiah, he went back to his job. When he heard the news that his home country, his homeland, was destroyed, he went back to work. And the role that he served and the position that he had was one of great trust. And Nehemiah was a trusted man to have such a high position in the king's palace. It was also one who was meant for Nehemiah. And it also was meant for him to see the king multiple times a day. This was an important role, a vital role for the king. One of great security by protecting the safety of the king, literally laying down his life at every meal. Every time a drink would come to the king, he would taste it first, test it first to make sure it wasn't poisonous. So on every single meal, he was risking his life. Now, for some people say, well, what was the role of the cupbearer? Some people say it was a butler. Others say it was an administrator. I think, take a look at this passage. It's logical to assume that Nehemiah's role was more than of administrative role than it was a mere servant. He had an important position. But he was in a dilemma. He was in a sad time. And he wasn't ashamed to show his fear. He refused to allow fear to stop him from doing his job and doing what God had called him to do. Are we ashamed to admit our weaknesses? I think many of us, we want people to think that we're tough. We don't want to be a bother. We want people to see us as a strong person, so we tell them, oh, don't worry about me. Don't allow this to bother you. I'm okay. I'm fine. But you see, Nehemiah was a stronger person because he was willing to reveal his own weaknesses and shortcomings. Was Nehemiah afraid? Sure he was. He was just doing his job, but there was some fear. It was business as usual for Nehemiah. He was doing his job, bringing the wine to the king. But what was unusual was the sad fact that he was sad. And he wasn't doing anything to hide this. Nehemiah was using the resources God gave him to accomplish God's vision. But the king noticed. You see, the king spent every day with Nehemiah at every meal. And he knew something was wrong. So when he heard something was wrong, he simply asked, why are you sad? The king became Nehemiah's resource. Even while asking that question, the Bible says that Nehemiah was fearful. As we take a look at it, it looks like to us the king is sensitive. He wants to know if something wrong. He wants to know if he can help. But we need to understand the power of the king. He wasn't equivalent to our president. He was the government. He was the one in charge, the ruler. If he didn't want sadness in his palace, sadness in his midst, sadness in his court, he could just simply dismiss the person and send them to jail, or even worse, send them to be executed just for being sad in his kingdom. Now, that may be puzzling to us, but that was the kind of power this king had. And it was a possibility that Nehemiah had to be prepared for. In addition, not only was it a risk to show sadness, but it was also a risk for Nehemiah to answer the question, why are you sad? You see, he was sad because his home country, Jerusalem, had been destroyed. The walls of the city, which was means of military security, was destroyed, left it open for bandits and other armies to take over. The gates in which they did their business, where their economy and their government flowed, was burned to the ground. And all this was due to anti-Jewish feelings. And if he brought that up to the king, he was questioning the king's own policy, his own military tactics, and his own choice not to intervene with Jerusalem. But what we see here, the dynamics, we have to make sure we understand the dynamics. Right before Nehemiah answers the king, he prays. He doesn't do anything. He stops and prays. Now, it doesn't say what he said. It could be a simple thing, God help me. And God knows. God knows when we're at a crossroads in life and we have to pray. We don't really have the words to say. We don't know what to say. So we simply pray, God with us. God help me. Guide me. Again, we have to understand the dynamics of this, where Nehemiah finds himself. Because 30 years earlier, in the story that many of us are familiar with, Esther was the one in Nehemiah's shoes. She had heard that there was a decree that was going to go out that they could kill all the Jews, and the Jews would be completely annihilated from their land. And it was up to her to talk to the king, to come before the king. But it was against the law for anyone to approach the king without him summoning them. So she risked her life to save her people. Nehemiah does the same thing. He's risking his life to save his people, to save his homeland. But if he simply misspoke, Nehemiah would not walk out of that palace. So I ask you, where are you with your risk? What risk is God urging you to take? And what is stopping you from pursuing this risk? What obstacle has God put in your place for you to overcome? The obstacle that Nehemiah was facing was the fact that he couldn't hide his sadness. He had to show it. And I think he intentionally showed his sadness. Now, he wasn't fake about it. He was devastated. But he did nothing to cover up the fact that he was devastated over his homeland, over his country. He allowed himself to look sad, to feel sad, and to be devastated so that the king would take the bait and ask him the question, what's wrong? And it is at that point that Nehemiah practices an insane amount of courage. And Benjamin Mead, who wrote the book We Want a Zoo, the main character says, you know, sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage. Literally, 1 through 20, 20 seconds of just embarrassing bravery. And I promise you, something will come of it. When we take the risk, it is because we believe in the purpose or the outcome. That's what we call buy-in. And the buy-in that Nehemiah has is he has the king right where he wants him. He has the king asking, what is it that you need? Nehemiah says this, and the king asks, what is it that you request? So I pray to God in the heaven and answer the king. If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor with you, send me to Judah and to the city where my ancestors are buried, so that I may rebuild it. The king with the queen seated beside him asked him, how long will your journey take, and when will you return? So I gave him a definite time, and it pleased the king to send me. Also, said the king, if it pleases the king, let me have the letters written to the governors of the region west of the Euphrates River, so that we will grant me safe passage until I reach Judah. And let me have a letter written to Ashaphat, keeper of the king's forest, so that he will give me timber to rebuild the gates of the temple fortress, the city wall, and the home where I will live. The king granted my request, for I am graciously strengthened by my God. And I went to the governors of the region west of the Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. And the king had also sent the officers and the infantry cavalry with me. Nehemiah answers the king, and he describes what he has heard. The city's in ruins, the gates are burned up, the walls are down. Let's face it, Jerusalem's in a disaster zone. It would have been labeled a state of emergency. But he adds his own personal touch. This is where the family was buried, his family. And this was his personal identification. He's telling the king, this is his Bible. This is why he's bringing this up. Is because this directly affects his life. Now Nehemiah takes several risks in this occasion. He took a risk by reminding the king that he was a Jew. Again, 30 years removed from when it was passed into the law that all Jews would be destroyed. Where Persia tried to eliminate all Jews from existence. But the Jews were also a substantial minority. With the destruction of Jerusalem, there were still apparently anti-Jewish feelings. But certainly the king knew Nehemiah. He spent every day with him. And having a role of a cupbearer, someone who would make sure he's safe to the point that he would drink the drink and be poisoned himself, that you would do an extensive background check. You would make sure this is the person you trust. But the king is interested in helping Nehemiah. He responds with, what do you want? Nehemiah, for some people, they would stop at being happy with the permission of going. Nehemiah doesn't stop there. He takes the next step and asks for even more. He needs time off. He needs letters of safe passage, and all it is are this group of letters that he would take with him, and the governors of the region would honor that and make sure they're safe crossing their region. He would need lumber. He would need supplies. And what does he receive? The king gives him the time off. The king gives him the letters so that he would be safe and could travel from region to region. The king gives him supplies. And the king goes above that and sends him an army with a cavalry. You see, Nehemiah asked God to take care of the situation. Nehemiah asked God's vision to be part of his life and be part of this situation. And God has a way of not only knowing your needs and making sure those needs are taken care of, but he also has a way of stepping it up and giving you more than what you're asking for. And what it was more than what Nehemiah was asking for was this army with a cavalry to protect them along the way and to help them once they got there. You see, in Ephesians 3:20, it says, a God who is able to do immeasurably more than what we are asked for or we can even begin to imagine. And it seems to be the case with Nehemiah. We don't always know all we need. We know what we need, but we don't know everything. But when we give to God and say, God, take care of me in this situation, guide me in this situation, help me in this situation, God has a way of giving us what we need and beyond. Sally Hawkins says, you only do good work when you're taking the risk and pushing yourself. God gives those who are willing to use the gifts to make a difference. What has God given you? You see, God gave Nehemiah his position with the king. God gave Nehemiah the leadership qualities, leadership abilities. God gave Nehemiah many things. And he gave Nehemiah these things so that he would work in such a time as this. But what has God given you? What's God given us? What has God entrusted to you? We have been blessed with many things. And the parables of the talents, the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, kind of tells us a little bit about what we've been given. In short, the parable basically says is about this. A master leaves, and when he leaves, he gives each of his servants measures of talents. Now, the talent in that time was a large sum of money. It was equivalent to a 1-year's salary. But he gives each one of them, according to their ability, the responsibility over these talents. And one of the responsibilities that he gives them is the first one receives 5 talents. And he invests and doubles his money and earns 5. He gives another one 2 talents, according to his ability, and he invests and he earns 2 more talents. And he is blessed. But the third one, he gives 1. Clearly, he knows his abilities are limited. He gives him 1 talent. And the talent that he gives him, he buries it. Nothing he's earned. Not even the slightest bit of interest. When the master comes back, he punishes that man because he said, I gave you something and you did nothing with it. While talents in this passage, it's foolish to think that it means the talent that we have today, the ability that we have, because that's not what's behind the parable. This talent is speaking solely of the sum of money. But it can be taken to the fact of what has God entrusted to you. If God is the master in this passage, what has he given you? What has he handed over to you to take care of? What we can get from this is the fact that God has given us gifts, abilities, relationship, resources, spiritual gifts, everything that we need to serve him. But how many of us are ready? And let's take it a step beyond that. How many of us are not only ready, but we're willing to do what God is asking us to do? God has blessed you with the family that you have, with the friends that you have. God has blessed you with the home that you have, with the finances that you have. God has blessed you beyond your wildest imagination. But with everything that God has handed over to you, has entrusted to you, what are you doing with it for him? How many of us are so self-absorbed, so self-conscious, that we're only focusing on what it means to us to have these gifts? Nehemiah is a great example for us when it comes to this. Nehemiah had his job. His job put him in a place where he could have a relationship with the king. And he does. He has a great, tremendous friendship with the king. And why that all comes together is because God has another step in this equation. God's going to use this job. He's going to use this friendship that he has with the king to save Jerusalem. So Nehemiah knows what's before him. He takes a look at his situation. He sees his position. His job as cupbearer. He sees the possessions that he has, the resources. And the biggest resource, quite frankly, is the king. That adds to his resources now that he has the safe passage letters and now that he has access to materials in an army. He also has the gift of leadership to able to lead them. But the third thing that we have to have, because position and possessions don't mean anything without number 3, that Nehemiah had was passion. He wanted to see the job done. So how many of us have a position where we can influence people? We have the resources, maybe they're limited, but we have resources where we can help and make a difference in our community. But we don't have passion. I hope that you want to see a difference in your family, that you want to see a difference in your relationship, you want to see a difference in your church, you want to see a difference in your community. Ask yourself, if that's my passion, then where am I? And what do I have to work with? I came across this quote that said, the civil rights movement, it wasn't just a couple of superstars like Martin Luther King, but it was thousands and thousands, millions of people taking a risk and becoming leaders in their community. The church, Christianity, it's not about central people. It's not about this select group of people that can have an effect and can change lives. It's about a family. Everybody coming together, taking a look at where are they, what position do they have, what resources do they have to work with, and what passion do they have. As the musicians come forward, I want to ask you those questions individually, specifically. Ask yourself, where am I in life? What is my position? The job that I have, the responsibilities I have, what am I supposed to do with that? Then the possessions. What do I have that I can work with? What do I have that I can use? And finally, what am I passionate about? What difference do I see, and what difference can I make? As we enter into these final moments of worship, these are the things I want us to reflect upon. As we ask ourselves, where am I? What do I have to work with? And together, what can we accomplish? As we enter into these final moments of worship, we have choices. One of our choices may be the fact that we're ready to become a Christian. Another choice that we have may be the fact that we want to be along to our family here at First Christian. And maybe the final one is you're just going through a time that you need prayer and encouragement. If any of those are your choices today, I would love to pray with you. I'd love to help you make those choices. But I would encourage you to stay where you are and pray. Give it to God and allow Him to work. Let's stand as we enter into these final moments of worship.
Jesus, draw